you about the role of the CTCN in climate technology innovation. But before I do, I will start off by giving you a small introduction, in fact, of what the Climate Technology Center and Network is, in case some people don't know what we are. So the Climate Technology Center and Network is part of the technology mechanism of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we were established to provide technologies that are environmentally sound to developing countries on both adaptation and mitigation. And so our assistance to countries includes technical assistance, knowledge sharing, collaboration, and network. And this covers several sectors across the board, actually. It could be agriculture, carbon fixation, energy, e-mobility, waste management. We really cover a wide range of services, including early warning and environmental impact assessment for countries. So to give you a sense of what we are currently doing in the CTCN, we have so far received over 200 requests in 2020. We are implementing around 90 of those, and we are currently working with another 90 that are active. So it's a whole range of countries we are working in right now. It's 102 countries globally. And this is how our technical assistance works. So the UNFCCC has established national designated entities, or NDEs, as we call them, in 161 countries that work with the CTCN to generate requests for support for technology transfer. And in order for us to provide that support efficiently, we have since 2018 established regional offices. So for the countries in Asia, we serve them through the CTCN regional office in Bangkok that is hosted by UNEP. For the countries in Latin America, we shall be serving them through the CTCN regional office in Mexico that is hosted by UNIDO. And for the CTCN service office, it will be based in Nairobi in the UNEP headquarters, and that is where we serve the African countries from. We will keep a core staff at the CTCN headquarters in Copenhagen in the UN city that provides overall oversight for the entire global work program. And so to go back to how it works, because most people ask us, how do countries access CTCN services? What happens if a developing country needs support from the CTCN? So the project proponent is always the NDE, who is the only authorized person at national level to put in requests to the CTCN. But the request that comes in from the NDE can be from a government ministry, from a research institution at national level, or even an NGO. And once we have received this proposal, this request for support from the NDE through a concept, they submit it to the Secretariat. We review this request against a criteria that has been approved by the advisory board. And once this request meets the criteria, we develop what we call a response plan, which is basically the plan on how we shall in detail respond to the request from the member state. Once we have that plan, we put out an open call or a bidding process to our network and request them to make themselves available to deliver that technical assistance to the member state that has it. So it's an open bidding process, and we do provide feedback to members. On average, the total cost of the technical assistance we give member states is no more than $250,000. An important component of the technical support we offer is to give the countries an opportunity to leverage our technical support to scale up. So many times when we do provide support to countries, we also support them to develop a project pipeline that enables them to scale up. So for example, in Laos, when we supported the country, we also helped them develop a GCF proposal for $10 million. Or when we were able to work with the West African countries on disaster risk reduction in the coastal area, we were able to partner with the World Bank to scale that up for a $200 million project. So that is an important part of the work we do to make sure that our technical assistance leads to scaled up action. So this table basically gives you a sense of the kinds of requests that we get from countries. You will see that from this pie chart, the majority of the requests that come to us from the developing countries are in fact for requests for decision-making tools or information provision, which is the largest number of requests, 25% of those. And this is followed very closely with the requests for feasibilities of technology options, then financing facilitation, followed by piloting and deployment of technologies in local conditions. So it's a whole range of requests that countries give to us, but I think they reflect the trust factor as a mechanism of the UNFCCC. Developing countries can come to us to curate technology options that they have at their disposal. So that is just to give you a little sense of what we do at the CTCN. And to go back to what really is the crux of the conversations we are having at this important conference, I'd like to share with you some of the work we are doing on innovation in the CTCN. The work I present to you is based on an analysis over the last 6 years, what CTCN has been doing. This work has been partly facilitated by Dr. Woo Jin Lee, who is on loan to us from the government of Korea, to support the development of our innovation work program. So this is what we've been doing on innovation in the CTCN. To start off by locating our work in the Paris Agreement, as you may all recall, the Paris Agreement calls for the creation of a technology framework to guide the activities of the technology mechanism, which is composed of the CTCN, the Climate Technology Center and Network, and the Technology Executive Committee that we work with very closely. And the framework is structured around 5 themes of technology. The first is innovation, which we are looking at now. The second is implementation. The third is enabling environment and capacity building. The fourth is collaboration and stakeholder engagement. And the fifth is support. So we work across all 5 themes of the technology framework. And in fact, starting 2019 to 2022, we restructured our work program to align it with the 5 themes of the technology framework following the guidance of COP24. For purposes of this conference, I'll just focus on the work we do on innovation, but as I said, our work cuts across all the 5 themes of the innovation of the technology framework. So to give you a context within which we do innovation, within the CTCN, we've structured our innovation work to fit into what we've called 4 openness models. And these are structured around the network, the open requests for technical assistance, the open technology transfer and finance, and then the open knowledge for the public. So there are 4 openness models through which you can access CTCN work on innovation. I'll explain each of them going forward. So the CTCN is designed around a network. Right now, we have around 600 members, the majority of which are private sector companies, which are 48.2% of the network members. And they are followed by research and academic institutions at 21.7%. This is an open network. Being a part of the network is free. It's an open network where members can interact regardless of whether they're private sector research, whatever their background is. And the idea is that they are all the experts and can deliver on some of the requests the member states make, but also it's an open network in the sense that they are willing to share their technological expertise once we put out the call through the open bidding. So this is the first component of our openness model, the open network, and we are always encouraging technology service providers to join this network. The second component of our openness model is what we call the open requests for technical assistance, or TAs as we generally refer to them. And again, as the services demand driven, so the member states come to us with their request, and the proponent is often officially the NDE, but the source of the request itself can be any national institution, as I said, including academia, research, and NGOs, but the NDE makes the formal request. And then our team of experts reviews this against an established criteria, and a consortium or network member delivers the technical expertise, that is required for technology transfer to the beneficiary member states. So the request process itself is open in that it is demand driven. The member states demand what they need. We don't tell them what technologies they need to apply. Two, it is an open request for technology transfer because we put this request to this large network that I told you about, and we tell them who has the capacity to provide this technological support. And then the network members bid, and we choose the best bid, and we provide that technical support to the member states with their approval. So it's a very open and transparent process. The third component of our openness model and innovation is on open technology transfer and finance. Again, central to this is the linkage between the government, the private sector, and the academic institution that CTCN enables as a matchmaker. So as a matchmaker of government to business or business to business. So this is an important part of the work we do. But our open technology transfer and finance is also structured around the open financing. It's a first come, first come basis, demand-driven service. So open finance based on the resources we have through voluntary contributions from member states, or through resources we get from the Global Environment Facility and the Green Climate Fund, or the Adaptation Fund. We work very closely with the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC, and we deliver programs of work together. But our open technology transfer and finance is also facilitated through a pro bono process, where in addition to making voluntary contributions, member states through the networks that represent them can offer additional pro bono support to particular requests that come from developing countries. And then we have several other partnerships, as I said, for scaling up with multilateral financial institutions or other funding partners. So the last component of our openness model that is quite innovative is the open knowledge portal for the public. We are always very pleased to say that right now our knowledge platform has been curated, and it is the repository of the world's largest climate technology information. This information now, we have designed our website for it to be available in the 6 languages of the UN. This information is updated daily. We update all the requests of the that come to the CTCN from the member states automatically. The requests are made online, and the website is automatically updated. So the numbers you see here are in real time, and they represent what is going on in the member states in terms of requests for technical assistance. So that is the innovative approach we've brought to delivering technology transfer to developing countries from developed countries in what we call the 4 openness model. If I look at what we've done in 2020, to give you an example based on the 4 openness model that I presented to you, I'll share with you some of the successes or achievements we've achieved as a team working together with the UN entities that host us and the network members. I can tell you that we've been able to support over 50 developing countries to transfer and deploy new or existing technologies. In some cases, they are existing technologies. We've been able to provide pro bono support in the areas, especially of e-mobility, carbon capture and storage, and smart cities. We've facilitated through our open network deep diving sessions with the SMEs through climate technology clinics. These SMEs in developing countries to help them grow as environmentally sound businesses. We've also been able in 2020 to undertake 7 R&D related virtual workshops that have attracted over 200 participants from the private and public sector. And then we've had several web-based discussions with CTCN network members. We have recently issued a special report on CTCN as a technology and innovation matchmaker, which is the basis of the presentation I am making right now. So I would encourage you to please Google it and read it. We will have a link as well through this presentation. It will give you a lot more detail of what I'm talking about. The third component of my presentation, I'd like to present to you the three-phased approach, or the 3 stages of the climate technology transfer that we offer at the CTCN. The first stage of technology transfer is what we call technology outsourcing. It constitutes the vast majority of the requests we receive. As I told you, the majority of the countries that come to us for support, they are seeking support in developing decision-making tools, or they're looking for information generally on technology, or they're looking for feasibilities on technology options. A lot of the countries know there are a lot of technologies out there, but they are not sure which is the more feasible one. So we curate those technology options and present the countries what are the more, most appropriate technologies for their context. And then there's technology identification and prioritization and other policy recommendations generally. That constitutes the bulk of our work, which is 82%. The second stage of our climate technology transfer is structured around technology RDND and finance. And here, the majority of the requests focus on piloting and deployment of technologies in local conditions and financing facilitation, especially through the GCF, the readiness program, and then research and development technologies. And the last stage is about technology diffusion. This is largely around private sector engagement and market creation. It's the area of least demand in the countries, and we think it's not necessarily the least needed. It's probably where there is least capacity, and so there is need to grow that area. In terms of the stage innovation model that I have presented to you, our analysis shows that at each stage of the open innovation model that I have presented to you, a large part of the technology transfer that we facilitate is in fact new technologies from external technology providers from developed countries to developing countries. So that is what we call the outside-in innovation, technology coming from outside in developed countries into developing countries. And then what we've also found in our analysis in terms of the work we provide is that outsourcing of innovation partners, especially incubators or accelerators, is suitable for what we call the inside-out business model. And here really the idea is to promote growth of endogenous technologies, especially at national level in developing countries. And the last part of the analysis shows that there is an important need to grow new market creation or dissemination platforms throughout the developing countries in order to enable technology diffusions, which is what we call the inside out. So these are technologies that would be developed at national level. So this is what our innovation model looks like in the CTCN. It basically describes the 3 things I've talked about. The outside-in innovation, where the technology service providers are from developed countries to developing countries, facilitated through CTCN, which is the big blue thing. And then the coupled innovation, where it is internal national level innovation in developing countries coupled with support coming in from developed countries. And then the inside out innovation, where we hope that through knowledge and capacity building, there will be endogenous capacities developed at national level. As I close, I want to talk to you about the future, what we see in CTCN sitting where we are in terms of the support that we provide to developing countries. I'll go quickly through this because of the time imperative. And generally what we see is that in terms of the open network that we talked about, we need to place greater emphasis on partnerships with local organizations. A lot of the developing countries that we service, in fact, do not have membership in the network because they simply don't have the capacity to meet the threshold of what the requirements are. So we can facilitate that through partnerships between the network members from the developed countries and the developing countries. And we have found that every time we've put out a bid and we've made a requirement that the network members from developed countries must partner with developing countries, it has worked very well as a means of building capacity, but also ensuring technology transfer at that level, even as we, and capacity transfer, even as we provide technology transfer to the governments themselves. We also see the need of growing the private sector, even though it's still the largest part of our network. We find that the private sector in the developing countries is not as developed as it is or as it should be in order to enable the transfer of environmentally sound technologies. So we do a lot of SME clinics for local SMEs in developing countries. We do deep dive sessions, we do matchmaking days where we matchmake network members from developed countries with those in developing countries. We also run accelerators and incubators that enable the scaling up of projects we do at national level through the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC. And going forward, we are also looking at how we can engage venture capital and angel funders to scale up on some of the work we do, but also to fund new innovations. In terms of facilitating RD&D, COP19, came up with a decision that required us to support countries in developing fully articulated proposals on building research, development, and demonstration related activities in collaboration with the financial mechanism of the convention. And the Paris Agreement also mandated the CTCN to take further work on technology, RD&D. And so in that regard, we've done quite a lot of things. The first thing we've done in working with the financial mechanisms of the convention is right now we are about to launch a new technology accelerator program, the Adaptation Fund, where we're just going to focus on adaptation technologies. But other things that we are doing is supporting, facilitating RD&D, one, by ensuring that countries have the requisite policy planning and finance mechanisms, what we call a national regulation-free environment or a regulatory framework that enables technology transfer. And then local adaptation of technologies for reducing risk towards market readiness. So how do we make sure the local market is ready to receive the technologies that we are delivering? And then the other lesson we find is that as the CTCN, we can be a catalyst for scaling up a lot of the work that needs to be done at national level, as I've demonstrated. The key challenge in this being that countries, in our experience in working with them, have not really prioritized RD&D and innovation in terms of their requests to CTCN. As you saw, the majority of the requests are on policy decision-making tools. So we would like to move to a position where countries are able to, to actually put in requests that prioritize innovation and RD&D. And this is something we are advocating about and also providing the capacity of countries to be able to do. One of the things we are planning to do, it's going to be piloted out of our liaison office in Songdo that is going to be established in Korea. is to set up what we are calling a new joint demo program, where we are going to support collaborative RDND. And the idea here is to support scaling up of technologies and fast to market approaches. We want to support the development of indigenous technologies in developing countries. And then we want to be able to categorize and scale up these technologies and customize them for the local service providers in the countries in which they need to be applied. We've coined a nice acronym that we call NEWS. And basically what it says is that we want to work with national regulation-free items or enabling environments for policy support that enable technologies for market readiness that are replicable and repetitive, and enable us to scale up for business. As I conclude, we've put together a long list. I hope you'll be able to have this PowerPoint of all the countries we've worked in terms of supporting technology transfer. But these are just examples of how, again, as part of innovation, we are supporting countries to use artificial intelligence for technology diffusion. We see data analysis for climate change, monitoring and early warning system, as well as hazard mapping and forecasting as a great opportunity for us to use artificial intelligence. And we've done this in several countries, in Indonesia, Thailand, Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Kiribati, and so many of the Pacific islands. We also see that this has worked well, not just in the Asia-Pacific region, but in Central Europe, in Georgia, where we looked at flood hazard mapping, in Africa, in Uganda, and in Ghana. But we also see the potential in energy efficiency optimization, and this is something we are looking at in Southern Africa, where we are working with the 8 regional countries in this area. In terms, again, of artificial intelligence for technology diffusion, we see that that machine learning, especially the use of big data to gather information, can play a very important role in our innovation work as we support developing countries in predictions, say for things like energy consumption or precision agriculture, in evaluation, where we look at material design or, for example, deforestation, but also in optimization, whether it's energy customization or smart building cities. So there are a lot of options that we can use where we see the potential in the future for us to use artificial intelligence generally, but big data gathering, as well as the Internet of Things generally. So I will stop here for now. This has given you a general sense of what we do at the CTCN generally, our work on innovation, and where we see the opportunities going forward. I thank you very much, and I'd like to hand over right now to Dr. Woo-Jin Lee. Dr. Woo-Jin Lee is the lead for the innovation work we do at the CTCN. He's on loan to us from the government of Korea as a senior specialist to help us structure this work. Dr. Woo-Jin Lee, I hand over to you now.
Okay, I think there are some panelists coming. We are ready for getting the panelists. Okay, just a second. Okay, now it's time for the panel discussions. I'm waiting the panels from all over the world for our, emerging technology innovation and convergence topics for discussions. And now you can see this today's topics for the panel discussions. John, could you invite the other panelists for these sessions, please?
Dr. Lee, it
Yes.
seems like the panelists are arriving a little bit late. So
Okay.
I think we can take some time for them to join the meeting. But meanwhile, maybe you can deliver some message for the audience.
Okay, I see. I will do that. Okay, I will start the panel discussion for these sessions. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are connecting with this from. My name is Ujin Lee, and I'm working as Senior Innovation Specialist for the CTCN. So those just who joined, you are very welcome to this event, just over 1 hour panel discussion with global climate change specialists. So first of all, I will give you a brief introduction about these panel discussions. The CTCN has been working on innovative approaches during matchmaking of technology transfer to developing countries by its core services called technical assistance as delivered by Rose as Keynotes. As you all know, innovation is a very important theme among the technology framework to guide the implementation activities of the CTCN as technology mechanism under UNFCCC. Also, technology innovations play a strategic role in improving the effectiveness and efficiency of national efforts to address climate changes. So during this event today, various topics will be discussed on green innovation and convergence. I'm sure that this discussion will be a great opportunity to guide the futuristic strategic approaches of the CTCN in terms of innovation perspective. So I will do working as a moderator today, but some of the panelists are coming a little bit late. So shall we wait a little bit? Then I will start moderating. Okay, I saw some of them is already. So for now, me as a moderator, I will start the panel discussion on today's subject of enabling green innovation through technological innovation and convergence. Actually, we have 4 panelists. Sorry for the absence of Dr. Kuda due to his meeting with the Energy Minister. So today we have Mr. Amit Kumar, Senior Director, Social Transformation of the Energy and Resources Institute, and Dr. Soo-il Kang, Chief Supervisor of International Environmental Research Institute of GIST in Korea, and currently works as a member of TEC, and Mr. Alter Marque, the Director General of Blockchain and Climate Institute, and Mr. Matthew Kennedy, Research and Independent NGO Representative, and a member of the Advisory Board of the CTCN. So specific topics for today's discussions are shown in the present slide. Each topic will be answered about 10 to 15 minutes by our representative panelists. So let me hand the floor over the first panelist, Mr. Amit Kumar. In order to transfer the climate technology to developing countries, one of the fundamental aspects, the innovation of the technology is very important. I know you have been working for more than 30 years on innovative technologies, especially in smart green buildings area at Terry. So could you please share your opinion on green innovation in your specialty?
Thank you, Dr. Wujin. Let me first of all share the screen. Now, technology is always an issue. Just a minute, please. I am unable to locate my file somehow. Yeah. Sorry for this hiccup, and good evening and good afternoon to respective participants. So I would essentially be giving a brief of what is smart green buildings and the innovations from a developing country's perspective, essentially from the Indian perspective. And when we talk of smart buildings, essentially we are talking of automation and building management that has been brought in the buildings through use of IoT. And essentially, two are the key features that smartness in buildings try to achieve. One is efficiency of energy use or energy consumption, and second is comfort conditioning of the buildings. So in developing countries' perspective, what we think, and personally I also think that way, that is the smartness only criteria that needs to be applied, or do we require innovation in a greater sense? And why I'm saying that? The point is that as far as smart buildings are concerned, the focus is always only on the active systems that are technologies and appliances that are being used in the building. But what about other passive and basic architectural features of the building that are left totally out of the ambit of smart buildings? So from that perspective, do we require innovation only on the smartness, or we want buildings to be made comfortable and energy and resources efficient? And when I say resources, it includes all kinds of resources, whether water or waste, and reutilization of these waste. This particular point becomes even more pertinent if we think of a scenario where, because of climate change, it's becoming very, very clear that in time to come, in a country like India, the temperatures are already risen and are going to rise even more. And that actually makes air conditioning much more a basic necessity in India rather than a comfort and luxurious requirement. And from that perspective, where do we bring in traditional architecture and practices which actually used to make buildings in such a fashion that artificial air conditioning requirement was minimized? So where does smartness include those kind of aspects which are very, very necessary for a developing country like India? Also, if you look at the pandemic that is ongoing, one thing that we have learned in India, that because of very high density, especially in places where economically weaker section reside, uh, the congestion is too much. Now, can the buildings design be in such a fashion that space is more efficiently used and these health and hygienic perspective can be taken into account? Also, we cannot actually think of buildings in an standalone mode, because ultimately buildings are part and parcel of larger urban planning. And especially from the Indian context, I can see that urban development as whole is very haphazard. So whether in that bad overall context only standalone smart buildings serve the purpose, and the purpose we are talking here essentially is to go to a level where decarbonization of the society can take place. So that those are the kind of things we need to take into account when we are talking of innovation in smart buildings. One very important aspect, even purely from the smartness is concerned, is the kind of bandwidth that we get of internet in a country like India, which is very, very erratic, which is non-uniform. So if everything is based on IoT, which are developed for developed countries where these kind of facilities and infrastructure are already well in place, whether those would suit a country like India as it is, or some kind of adaptation would be required to be undertaken over there. In the context of India, Honeywell has actually created a smart building score, and where it looks into three particular aspects: green aspect, safe aspect, and productivity aspect. And within the green aspect, they looked into energy sources, what are being used to supply electricity and energy in those buildings, utility sources, how the temperature is being controlled, how the electricity is being controlled, and other conditioning and all. And what this smart building score, which scored actually, which ranked about 2,000 buildings across India along different kind of categories, found that most of the smart, or rather smartest buildings in India are essentially either large airports or big office buildings. So it is also very clear that as far as smartness in buildings are concerned, we are nowhere near residential segment, and which essentially is a big segment and very important segment in India. So what kind of innovation that are required to be brought in as far as residential sector are concerned? This is, I'm not going to go through it, but this just give a of what are those smartest buildings are there as per Honeywell score. Now, one part is that what private sector is doing in that regard, and another is India as a governmental side, whatever efforts are being done on that front. And if you look at India's energy conservation building code, which again is more focused on commercial buildings, only recently it has started bringing in residential segment into fold. It again focuses on very specific segments, that is building envelope design, how energy efficiency in different equipment in the buildings, whether those relate to HVAC, interior or exterior lightings, electrical power and motors. What are the kind of renewable energy generation that is brought into picture, whether from the point of view of electricity or whether from the point of view of energy, which is essentially hot water generation in India's context, and how the embodied energy of walling material and structural systems is taken into account. So now we see totally two disconnected parts. One is, on one side is smart buildings, which is talking essentially more of how the building systems could be controlled and how smarter in terms of building management could be brought into picture. And on the other side is governmental systems that talk more of energy efficiency point of view, but there is no convergence of these two. And that's where actually my argument is that if we are talking of innovations in buildings for countries like India, developing countries, and I would think that most of developing countries would fall in that category, then we will have to come out with a blended approach where the basic tenets of green buildings, energy efficient buildings, and the smartness are put together to come out with a holistic approach. So really smart buildings, to my mind, would combine these basic building blocks and IoT-based building management system. So if we then couple them and come out with green smart buildings, then they should propagate energy and resource efficiencies, net zero energy concept, and of course, automated and intelligent control, which actually feed into point number 1 and 2. Why this is very important from India's point of view is the fact that the country that we are going to be is about 1.6 billion population, and 2/3 of that construction is still to be made. So if that building stock is going to be made in business as usual scenario, then we can forget about decarbonization of society in that time frame. And that means it is very, very essential that this blended approach is taken into account right now. How CTCN actually can help propagate it, that it should help countries in developing and adopting these blended approach of green smart buildings, identify portfolio of technologies and products which can help into implementation of this blended approach, and very importantly, help countries adopting some kind of building rating system which actually promotes energy efficiency and overall resource efficiency. All that is possible only if at different level of the society, whether those are decision making or people or are people who are practitioners, are actually well versed in these kind of approaches, and that means capacity building. And what I feel that CTCN can play a very important role by providing a platform where private sector players and startups and other like-minded people can come and have interaction to help these kind of things to be promoted in a big fashion. So that's all from my side. And later on, I would be looking forward to if there are any question answer or if there are any clarification. Thank you, Dr. Lee. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your valuable opinion for sharing on the technology innovation from the developing countries' perspective and the role of the CTCN. Then next, I will give the floor to Dr. Suil Gang for the sustainable innovation of developing countries. Local indigenous capacity in developing countries should be grown along with technology innovation. As a policy arm of technical mechanism, I know Technology Executive Committee has been working on these issues. As one of the members, Dr. Gang, could you explain current activities on technology innovation and indigenous capacity building in developing countries, please?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Reed, for the kind introduction. I'll share my slide first. Can you see my slide? Okay. First of all, good morning, good evening, and good morning. I would like to deliver special thanks to Seoul National University and then CTCN for giving me chance to present the text work on innovation and endogenous capacity and endogenous technology. Okay, tech is a policy arm of the technology mechanism, and CTCN is the operational arm or implementation of technology mechanism. Tech comprises of 20 expert members. Key functions to analyze technology issues and provide policy recommendations and facilitate and promote technology cooperation to scale up action. Currently, tech is conducting 4 years rolling work plan from 2019 to 2020. It has 5 key thematic areas: innovation, implementation, and enabling environment and capacity building. Under the implementation theme, tech recently published a report on innovative approaches for uptaking of existing technologies. So I'll introduce this part today. And under the enabling environment and capacity building, tech conducted a survey on endogenous capacity and technology. 2 other key thematic areas are collaboration and stakeholder engagement and support. And tech is working work in collaboration very closely with the CTCN according to the CAP recommendation and mandate. First of all, I'll introduce the work outcomes from the study on innovative approaches to accelerating and scaling of climate technology. For that work, innovations can be identified in the following areas. For example, when countries select the technology options, we can consider innovative approach. And second one is when they solicit climate technology planning, we can consider stakeholder views and practitioner knowledge and their preferences. Third one is we can consider financial innovation aspect. And finally, we can consider viable ways of enhancing private sector engagement in incubator. And this year, tech published the report as shown in the as a figure, a portal. Tech published the report through this work. This figure shows the scope for innovative approaches in scaling up and accelerating climate technology implementation. At the bottom left side, there is a deployment, and then we can see a market side. So to reach scaling up and acceleration, we can consider there are several approaches. First one is we can consider at the technology prioritization steps. So we can use modeling or stakeholder assessment for the technology prioritization. Second one is at the stakeholder engagement, we can include stakeholder engagement. We can co-develop, and then we can also think the co-ownership of technology decision. So the one is finance for the risk reduction, and to leverage the private capitals, we can consider innovative finance. Fourth one is we need to enhance private sector engagement incubators. So we can, in this step, we can include multi-sector partnerships. And then final one is we can also kind of cross-cutting aspect those are like backbones for those four innovative approaches. It includes institution planning, knowledge sharing, and measuring progress. And this slide shows key conditions for utilizing the innovative approaches shown in the previous slide. This graph shows, if you look at the blue line, a country with a relatively high developed capacity for technology diffusion usually can rely more on market-based pull conditions. In contrast, if you look at the least LDC country, would rely more on the government actions to push climate technology toward wider diffusion. So innovative approaches in the previous slide can help balance division of government push and private sector pull actions. It give insight to the international collaboration aspect. LDCs can benefit more strongly from government-to-government collaboration and international support. Developed countries with more mature market systems benefit more from multi-stakeholder partnerships. So a country's innovative capacity through market-led pull factors strengthen capacity for technology neutral development. So they can have more technology options than cost-effective criteria. Okay, this is the key message from the work. So we can say that strive for more balanced public and private collaboration. So also through innovative approaches, market pull actions can alleviate the burden of the government push actions. And then stakeholder engagement is key. So we can also consider innovative financial instrument. And then also the solution, technology solution for adaptation by scaling up can benefit from all innovative approaches like solutions for mitigation. A second work regarding the innovation is incubators and accelerators. Currently, the Green Climate Fund is developing RFP on climate technology incubators and accelerators. In 2018, CTCN, TEC, and GCF co-hosted a symposium to examine the feasibility of the incubator and accelerator approaches for climate technology entrepreneurship in developing countries. Through such collaboration, TEC and CTCN, GCF published 3 reports and 2 reports and 1 tech brief. Okay, I'll move on to the endogenous capacity and technology part. It was carried out in 2018 through survey to NDs and the stakeholders. TEC conducted this study, and through this study, TEC published 1 paper shown in the portal. Okay, this slide shows we try to first define what is the endogenous technologies from the stakeholder perspective. So these are definition for the requirement for the endogenous technology. So technologies developed within country, technologies developed elsewhere but adapted to local needs and conditions, technologies developed by in country and the external peoples. These are definition for endogenous technology from stakeholder perspectives. So this slide shows what the definition for endogenous capacities. So top 3 components is capacity to assess technology needs from individual to national level, adapt technologies to local needs and conditions, and identify appropriate technologies to meet needs. So this, you can see the blue is from ND survey, and the pink is from observer survey. Okay, this slide shows ongoing work on the endogenous technology and capacity. Now, TEC is conducting a study on identification of needs, gaps, challenges, and enabling environments to promote endogenous capacity and technology. And then the report will be available in early 2021. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Gang. It was very nice explanation for the text work. Now we'll move to the next presentations. I can see the Matt Kennedy. Are you ready? Actually, I will introduce Mr. Matt Kennedy as a representative for the research and independent NGO, as a member of an advisory board of CTCN. I know you have been working actively, especially on analyzing many stakeholders' opinions by various surveys. So amongst our stakeholders, donors are very precious as one of our major policy customer. So could you add some comments on this perspective on the CTCN innovations, please?
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much, Dr. Wu Jin Lee. Let me share my screen for, and I would hope that you could see this all okay.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So good evening to everyone in Korea, and it is my pleasure to be presenting here on behalf of the Advisory Board of the Climate Technology Center and Network. The focus of my subject and my topic, representing the research and independent NGOs, is to give the donor perspective, or maybe a developed country perspective on innovation. The first point I'd like to make is that there is no single approach to innovation. So you can read it in textbooks, you can read the academic theory behind it, but ultimately there are certain components that are required, and one of those is an understanding of your own local or national conditions. So you cannot really standardize the approach per se. What I would say is that national systems of innovation are varied, and they vary across regions, they vary within continents, and it's what you need. As Einstein said, if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. Often we need to be thinking about both what the origins of the problem are and what the innovation can help provide the solution to that problem. But ultimately, they're varied. In terms of the goals, so what innovation is trying to respond to is across a number of different clusters, a number of different sectors. So the work of the CTCN, you may see it as just technology, technical assistance and capacity building, but it impacts on lots of different clusters, from health to civil society, from, of course, climate, energy and mobility, the bioeconomy and agriculture and environment. The major intervention areas here are what has been identified by the European Commission, but I think that they are very relevant for most countries. If I pick on a couple, if you look at the digital industry and space, this circularity becomes really important. Enabling technologies become important. Supply chains around manufacturing become very, very important. Of course, from the health perspective, the air pollutants, healthy well-being, all of these are direct impacts resulting from a lot of climate action work that's carried out by the CTCN. And furthermore, in terms of it isn't just about mitigation, but adaptation also. So circularity around food systems, and having a significant supply of those type of systems become really important. But now, what can the CTCN do? So firstly, the CTCN in many ways is an enabler. This is something that is country driven, demand driven by developing countries, by especially those targeting least developed countries and small island developed nations. But what it does is it helps to develop these systems of innovation, or another term, this enabling environment. What is required in terms of identifying, assessing, and responding to needs that are within that particular country? This is what I mean by systems of innovation vary across countries, because the country's challenges are often different. What the CTCN can do is working with the governments within those, the NDEs and even the NDAs, the development authorities, designated authorities, to help support the policies and the regulations. I'm giving examples here. So, of course, my colleague from the Technology Executive Committee talked about incubators, hugely important to stimulate action by industry or mobilize the private sector to engage with the public. There's also gap and strengths identification and helping to support public policies. So you develop a policy based on an understanding of what a gap you have or a strength that you have. You establish the institutional and the policy framework. As an example, of course, COVID-19 has really challenged our supply chains. So bringing more resilience or planning into those, or considering what your longer term NDC objectives should be, and putting together some actions to respond to those challenges. So this, again, identification of such gaps and the diffusion of challenges. And this diffusion part is really, really important in terms of the CTCN and helping countries to share knowledge and share information and diffuse the impact of the projects, the technical assistance that's been provided. And again, picking on another point around endogenous technologies and the skills, the needs, and the not only the resource that are available within a country in terms of maybe technology or renewable energy, but also the skill sets that's required, the pathway to skilled, trained staff to be able to respond to those. So the individual skills of workers, and that of course happens through deep stakeholder interaction. So where would you, if you had a pool of money that was coming from the Green Climate Fund or the Global Environment Facility or the African or Asian Development Bank, where would you focus that investment in terms of stimulation of innovation? And often this innovation should be around sustainable development. It should be around both ecological, social, and economic transitions. And how that triangle works is really important. The solutions aren't just the ones that are the most cost effective. They're the ones that have the most ecological impact in a positive way, the ones that have the most nature-based solutions, and that bring communities along in terms of responding to those societal challenges. So ultimately, this is about setting goals at a high level for policymakers, but those goals have translate themselves into things like decarbonization, things like moving towards nature-based solutions that ultimately link together to form part of a country's NDC. So in terms of the CTCN, what it has proven itself over the last number of years to be extremely productive in terms of matchmaking and collaboration. So bringing entities together to collaborate and share knowledge. Or innovation can be about helping policymakers understand the technology cycles and trialing and demonstrating technologies. Leveraging the strengths in terms of breakthrough technology. This is what innovation is all about. And that types of innovation brings economic growth and it brings enhanced well-being. Ultimately, at a country level, you're building capacity. that absorptive capacity that often the UNFCCC talks about. And this involves supporting national champions. So whether those national champions are policymakers, or whether they're industry leaders, or whether they're from civil society, they're the ones that are championing the actions and the innovation actions at a regional or a country level. So often what is required is more data, information provision, data to support new entrance into countries, and development of new technologies, service or products, and ultimately new business models that can help countries to respond to the global and changing climatic needs. Now, when I describe innovation, I just described that it is not rocket science. So why isn't everything so easy? Because innovation does require an ecosystem. It requires an environment around it for it to flourish, and it isn't just a thing on its own. So what I would describe is what the CTCN does to try to stimulate that innovation ecosystem. So sometimes you can view it in terms of, on the left-hand side, you may have mitigation actions, or on the right-hand side, you have adaptation, but things are becoming much more blurred than that. So at a central level, the CTCN engages with the national designated entities, and it engages with network organizations that operate within those regions. So it helps to do things like preparing countries with their technology needs assessments or their technology action plans. It also, as I mentioned, helps build national systems of innovation that are suited to the conditions of those countries, and actually enable those countries to remove some of the barriers that exist within those countries. So once that framework is there, what can the CTCN do? It can provide technical assistance, of course. It can be an enabler to stimulate capacity building, and it can help countries to shape and inform and develop some policy enabling actions that ultimately bring together the public sector and the private sector. Now, these areas are quite diverse, but it shows the nature of the different targeted interventions. So you can see on the CTCN's website by geography, by country, even by technology. Certain challenges are around transport mobility, electromobility. Others are around supply chains and circular economy. Some projects are agricultural focused in terms of smart agriculture and transformation that's required. And ultimately, you have energy, and both energy use and energy supply and behavioral change that's required. So those are targeted interventions, maybe that interacts both mitigation and adaptation. But ultimately, it's about preparing for the future and ensuring that the countries are prepared and become more resilient to changing climate. And now we are talking about things that really impact small island states, that impact least developed countries, coastal zone areas, the importance of human health in terms of responding and being prepared, having early warning systems, new kind of transport and urban design, and agri-forestry. So strengthening climate resilience, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about innovation. Enabling countries to become more prepared for the adverse impact of climate change in their region. So as I come towards the end, it's about just reflecting a little on what, from a research and innovation perspective, what are the future trends? And once we understand what those trends are, it's really about understanding how they may inform future action. Of course, we know that digital and enabling technologies are important, and they actually interact with as an enabler, not something on their own, but as an enabler to help countries to respond to what their own perceived challenges are. Bio-based solutions are important also as our flexibility around our own systems. So really, it's electricity, you could say that, but it is actually, this is a service. It's a service to enabling people to provide more clean cooking, more healthy environments. More access to electricity brings more access to potential innovation, mobility, and more innovative businesses, and of course the improvement of health. These are the common trends that are featuring. So how should the CTCN how should it align to such trends, and what does it need to do in terms of its future plans? And it is responding. So it has now changed from being a model that was based in Copenhagen to a model that is based at a regional level. So the technology assistance that's been provided to countries is much more aligned to those countries, because the development advisors of the CTCN are closer to those countries at a regional level in their various hubs. So it's supporting that country-led innovation. There is a clear link, and the COP have mandated it, between the technology framework and the financial mechanism. So creating more impact through the market involves more interaction between entities involved in technology and technical assistance like the CTCN, and financial entities like the GCF and the Global Environment Facility, and any multilateral bank within the region. Cooperation becomes really important, not only because it can stimulate a regional approach, but it can also share ideas. And in an academic sense, this idea of technology leapfrogging, so you can actually learn from other people's challenges, in many ways their failures, and actually overcome those for an impact that happens much sooner in your own country. And such cooperation becomes really important, and we can see how the CTCN have moved to establish an office in Korea with assistance from the Korean government. Reinforcing of open models for innovation. So often it's all about open innovation. It's often about sharing and then responding to the needs of those countries through that type of open innovation, where the needs of a country are matched with the technology that could be potentially provided to overcome and overcome those challenges and respond to those needs. So that involves partnerships. This is the importance of the network as part of the CTCN, bringing different types of organizations together to respond to those needs and encourage the knowledge sharing. So for now, I'll pause my presentation. Of course, I'm very happy for questions. If we can all see the future, we can see one where organizations are collaborating together to respond to the challenges that are affecting us all. And it's all about looking to see what that future looks like and putting together the right and appropriate NDC to respond to those challenges. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt, for your precious comment. It was very impressive that what you showed, the CTCN's future direction of innovations based on the establishing innovation ecosystems. Then for the final panelist, I will introduce Mr. Alastair Marquet, Director General of Blockchain of Climate Institute. As we saw in Keynote presentation for future innovation of the CTCN, private sector's engagement and digital technology convergence are very crucial. So what do you think the role of private sector in digital technology convergence with climate technology? Actually, he cannot join online right now, but he sent a kind of previously recorded video for our presentation. So I will share his recorded videos for myself. You can enjoy. Can you see my share? I'm not sure you can see my present screen.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, so I will start the recording of his video.
안녕하세요, ladies and gentlemen in Korea, and good morning to our colleagues here in the UK and Europe. My name is Alastair Mark. I'm the Director General of the Blockchain and Climate Institute. It is indeed my pleasure to be part of this GSTV conference panel discussions virtually in Seoul today. And let me tease my answers by saying that, very simply, The private and third sector have an absolutely critical role to play in bringing emerging digital technologies to our battle against the existential challenge of climate change. Throughout my talk, you will see QR codes on my slides. You can pick up your phone to scan these QR codes, which will lead to our website, providing further information about our organizations and work programs. But before I get into that question, first let me just briefly introduce the work of the Blockchain and Climate Institutes. We established during COP23 in Poland in 2017. We are a not-for-profit think tank supporting governments in the deployment of blockchain and emerging technologies in climate change policy implementation. Our mission is to raise awareness and effect positive changes among the international climate change policy community of the tremendous potential of blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things to considerably enhance climate actions. Basically, our work programs are structured around the 4 work streams under the UNFCCC Technology Transfer Framework. They include the provision of technology information, the provision of an enabling policy and regulatory environments for technology transfer, supporting capacity building for technology transfer, and develop regional mechanisms for technology transfer. To facilitate climate blockchain technology transfer, we have become a fully accredited member of the CTCN since February this year. Actually, our work started with a book project called Transforming Climate Finance and Green Investment with Blockchains back in 2016. It is the world's first book on blockchain and climate change issues, and it contains almost 300 pages of use cases about how blockchain can tackle a variety of climate change issues. Now, this book is available in more than 150 university libraries. Today, the Institute has a network of 80 expert members from 30 countries, supported by a 100-person secretary. We are producing our new book, again, the world's first one, by Cambridge University Press before COP26 next year. This book will focus on the legal and regulatory perspective in carbon markets. Hopefully, it can facilitate the Article 6 negotiation during COP26 next year. So back to the question, what is the role of the private sector in bringing together digital technology and climate technology? My argument can be summarized into 3 key points. Firstly, emerging innovative technologies such as blockchain are critical in enabling the transition to a low-carbon world. Secondly, academic or research institutions, governments, and the private sectors are all critical to stimulating innovation. This is not just about the private sector any more than it is just about governments, academics, or supranational institutions. Partnership is key. Thirdly, in this context, building deep, trusting, and credible relationships and shared knowledge across stakeholders is crucial. BTI actually belongs to the third sector, the sector between the public and the private. So my answers here are based on the roles of both sectors to partner with governments for technology transfer. Firstly, technology research and development, or R&D, private and third sectors play an active role in technology research and development. For example, the BCI's program of Blockchain for Future Energy Labs in a couple of countries are an example of how we aim to bring a private sector tech together with public and private sector low carbon renewable energy generation to improve all these project viability. may be able to extend this blockchain for future energy lab to Korea if your government is keen to support it. Secondly, is about financing. With regard to financing, public sector support to climate technology transfer is still essential, but more private finance is necessary for dominating market-induced innovation. The sheer scale of the climate challenge means combating it will require the global flow of private sector investments to align with low-emission, climate-resilient pathways. Delivering these financial flows can be greatly facilitated through technology. For example, the chair of BCI's Sustainable Finance Council has created a blockchain-supported clean technology investment matchmaking platform, which I will talk about further in a moment. Thirdly, is about market creation. In order to fill the gap between unattractive climate technologies and market needs, private sector engagement and its collaboration with government are very important. And so is the partnership between the third sector organization and governments. Fourthly, is the transfer of technology itself. In the context of climate change, the IPCC defines technology transfer as a broad set of processes covering the flows of know-how, experience, and equipment for mitigating and adapting to climate change amongst different stakeholders such as governments, private sector entities, financial institutions, non-governmental organizations, and research or education institutions. In this regard, in order to be an effective and efficient innovation matchmaker for technology transfer, building trustful partnerships with many different stakeholders is both an essential and time-consuming issue. The efficiency of markets is critical to achieving this technology transfer. BCI has a critical role here through our capacity building work with institutions around the world. We understand that blockchain and other emerging digital technologies can be complicated, and we want to help demystify its potential for as many stakeholders as we can. Last but not least is the technology assessment improvement. Following the development and implementation of the technology, the final step for the private sector is to assess the functioning of the technology, how this has been adopted by key stakeholders, and make any necessary improvement to maximize its potential to decarbonize our economies. Until now, current flows of climate finance are around 60% below what is required to achieve the ambitions of the Paris Agreement. This reflects inadequacies in both the private and public sectors, with visibility, scale, and information asymmetry being key contributors. Let me share with you an example about how blockchain converges with other digital technologies to tackle climate change issue through a platform created by the chair of our Sustainable Finance Council, Arizona Spring. Fintech Market was founded in 2014, specializing in financing clean technology projects. It is a global online marketplace connecting project developers, funders or investors, advisors, and end users with smart algorithms, machine learning, and blockchain technologies. It has already streamlined deal origination and transactions processes for over 1,000 renewable energy projects in 30 countries so far. Cleantech Market works by creating a tiered validation process. The first tier rates each project using 20 criteria. The second tier adds local expertise and reputation to make the project credible, and the third tier uses pre-approved agents to check and qualify specific projects. Cleantech Market works by combining transaction services, industry services, and a core matchmaking platform which connects users based on their own attributes. Considering Cleantech Market's functionality, we see that smart algorithms are used to match users based on their specific criteria. Machine learning, which is a subset of the artificial intelligence, is then used to understand user patterns and determine user trustworthiness, which will form part of the overall users' ratings. For example, the technology could be used to link developers of solar projects in specific regions, thus enhancing their access to know-how, finance, and peripheral intelligence. Blockchain technology can provide a decentralized and secure database for clean energy and climate finance projects going forward. To prevent fraud, there is a digital authentication process by usage of a digital passport for each user.
I think we have lost Dr. Lee. Maybe while he connects again, we can try and answer some of the questions that have been put to us by the participants. We are sorry about that. So we do have a few questions that have already come our way from the participants. I'm not quite sure in which order you would like to take them. But the first question really from our participants is, what are the most impactful technologies that we see in the work we do in the CTCN, but also in the tech? I think Mr. Amit and Dr. Matthew Kennedy, you know, from the work we do as part of the technology mechanism, some of the conversations we do, some of the conversations we have, what are these technologies? Dr. Kang, I think from the Technology Executive Committee, you could also share some of those experiences from the analysis you've done. What are some of those technologies? And then the second question is in relation to challenges. The participants are asking what are some of the biggest challenges we see in terms of trying to promote technology transfer. And then the third question is, do fourth industrial revolution technologies really provide any significance to developing countries, or are they just a mirage? That's a question as well we've received. And then I have a fourth one. I will repeat them later. I'll finish with the fourth one. What are the recommendations from the CTCN and from the technology mechanism generally in creating national or regional mechanisms to evoke incubation and acceleration of green, climate, digital technologies? So it's a whole range of questions we've received. I will just start with Dr. Kang. You can respond to what, you know, one of the questions I can repeat in no particular order. Dr. Lee, just to let you know, we've started with some of the questions that we've received from our participants. You have them, but you also had some others. So I will I'll let you take over. I had asked Dr. Kang if you'd like to respond to any of the questions in no particular order, please. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Rose, for giving me a chance to answer to those questions. Actually, first of all, I'd like to answer to the first question about what is the best, technologies. Actually, I would say that we need, in many cases so far, we just talk about the appropriate technology for developing countries, but I would say that now we need to think differently. We should have a costly, effective, affordable technology, but it should be very innovative and then excellent technologies. To really, we need to reach the Paris Agreement goal and then sustainable development goals. So that is my answer for the first question. And second one, the biggest challenge, I would say that, as you know, globally, now many countries, 80 countries conducted technology needs assessment. And one of the steps is identify barriers and enablers. Consider the outcomes of the TNA reports. The most biggest challenge is economic and then financial challenges. For example, lack of or inadequate access to financial resources. For example, that is one of the economic and financial challenges. And then at the same time, we can consider, others, policy, legal and regulatory challenges, technical challenges, market conditions, information and awareness, and institutional and organizational capacity, human skills, and sometimes we have challenges with social, cultural, and behavioral challenges. But anyway, the biggest challenge is the economic and financial challenges.
Thank you, Dr. Kang. Dr. Kennedy, do you have any additions to make in terms of what the most impactful technologies you think are, and what some of the challenges we face in supportive technology transfer?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to answer. What I would caution against is choosing technology winners. There's a tendency to look at the global reports who say, "Oh, photovoltaics is the winner. Let's go with it." My advice would be, you need to look at a country, and you need to consider what the regime is, the policy within that country, the financial environment within that country, what the natural resources are. It might be very windy, there might be no wind, and you need to look at the skill set within that country to be able to maintain, operate, manage all these things. But putting that aside, really, so there isn't one selection that fits all. But what I would say is, energy efficiency is often the first way. It's the cheapest fuel. It's where you, at an industry, at a public sector, everyone has buildings, everyone has lighting. These are the type of things that we would need to consider as a very first action. Now, what happens with that also, you need energy supply companies, you need different types of business models to suit that. And that's often where the investment needs to happen in efficiency and providing the right environment to be able to deliver on your efficiency requirements, from energy auditing to performance contracting and all of these things. The next step then, of course, is to look at where your main strengths are in terms of your skill set as a country, but also what you are committed to within your NDC, and actually targeting the most the most value technologies to deliver on those NDC commitments. So whether they're agri-based technologies, whether it's renewable electricity technologies, which also has questions around your grid, but to best deliver on your NDC and actually achieve your NDC commitments. So, you know, there isn't one size fits all. You need to look at your own environment, but certainly the natural thing to focus on at the very start at a technology basis would be efficiency.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Mr. Amit, you gave us a very good example of what's going on in India. So you talked about these challenges, but would you like to elaborate on that? But also, someone raised the issue of the fourth industrial revolution technologies, if this is something really that can be taken up by developing countries, or is it just a mirage? That's the word they used.
Thank you. First of all, let me take up the challenge part. In fact, most of it is actually going to be reiteration of what Dr. Kang and what Dr. Kennedy had already said. I think as far as transfer of technologies and transition in general is concerned, it goes without saying that we need to first of all address the demand side rather than looking only on the supply side options, because given the fact that the new supply side options are, at least on the first cost basis, are more expensive, it makes economic sense actually to first of all reduce the consumption side and then see how the remaining part is going to be taken care of. Having said that, I think 2-3 factors that are very important as far as this whole transition, including technology transfer, is concerned is first of all the kind of capacities that the recipient countries has, because without looking into that and looking at something which is totally, I would say, quantum jump from whatever we are used to. So that needs to be first of all looked into. I am not saying that quantum jump cannot be actually attained or should be aspired for, but then beforehand the capacities have to be actually built in that direction. Also, what are the political will at the top level in that country to go in for these kind of technologies? So financial part, economics, all those things in any case stand in their place. I'm just trying to flag some additional issues. And what we have seen in India, especially from the point of view of renewable electricity, at times the mindset of the people who are already there managing these kind of things, that also plays an important role. So unless until oldies like me are ready to change my mindset to adopt new kind of technologies, at times it becomes very difficult, because then I will try to find out faults and in everything. That is that. Now, as far as fourth industrial revolution is concerned and whether it is mirage for developing countries, I don't think that it's a mirage for developing countries. I'm pretty sure that whatever name we give it, whether it is Revolution 4.0 or 5.0 or 3.0, I think some of the aspects of Industrial Revolution 4.0 are already imbibed by different countries in bits and pieces. So it would be actually very difficult to come to that borderline when we say that, okay, now 3.0 has finished and 4.0 is going to start. I think it's that line already has blurred, and because of application of IT in a variety of fields in any country, in any developing countries, I would say that that journey has already begun. So I am pretty hopeful that we are also moving in that direction, and why 4.0, we are going to 5.0 also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I make a few comments, Dr. Kang or Dr. Kennedy, do you have any additional comments on these questions that you'd like to talk about?
Nothing from my side. Thank you, Rose. Yes.
All right. So before I hand over to you, Dr. Lee, I think I'd just like to say that for the questions from our participants, I think it was very interesting to listen to the questions, especially the one on the fourth industrial revolution. I think I agree with Mr. Amit that yes, in fact, there are bits and pieces of it already that are quite operational in developing countries, at least in the countries where we operate. So we see things like additive manufacturing, especially 3D printing and manufacturing, and are making a lot of difference, especially in terms of the work that is being done on circularity. And this is very helpful. We also see that quite a lot of the developing countries now are very keen to work with autonomous robots, for example. We've seen what is happening in Rwanda. We have a few requests now coming in for autonomous robots and drones to support our agricultural sector. And then the whole issue of big data and analytics, especially for disaster preparedness and readiness and planning. So in fact, a lot of this is happening already in the developing countries. The more important thing is how we can strategically support these countries to really harness the opportunities that come with the fourth industrial revolution. We've been told that big data is the big oil, is the gold or the big oil for the next industrial revolution. So how do we support developing countries to benefit from that? So there are a few experiences coming out of that from the work that we do in the CTCN. And lastly, someone asked a question specifically to me on how the CTCN is moving towards regionalization, especially in terms of incubation and acceleration. I think I did mention this, and Dr. Kennedy knows this, being a board member for the CTCN, that starting 2018, CTCN moved into a regional approach. I mentioned briefly our regional offices in Bangkok for the Asia Pacific region. And in addition, we'll have a liaison office in Songdo, supported by the government of Korea, to enhance our liaison work with the GCF, but also to support our innovation and R&D work that Dr. Lee is helping us set up at the CTCN. And then our Africa office that is based in Nairobi at the UN Environment Headquarters, and the Latin American office that will be based in Mexico in the UNIDO regional office for Latin America. So in the spirit of that move, we will not only be more responsive to the requests of the member states that we serve, but we'll also be able to support what we are now calling the programmatic approach, whether it's for accelerators or incubators that speaks to the needs of particular countries in the region. So really, that is the approach moving forward that we've received guidance on, and I see that already this is bearing fruits. Last year, we reported an exponential growth in the number of countries that were putting in requests to the CTCN, and we believe part of that is because we are closer to the countries we serve. We expect this trend to continue. In 2020, we will be reporting to our advisory board and the general public soon that we've been able to deliver a full program of work because we've had this pipeline of countries. We are closer to them and we are able to deliver that. So those are some of the responses I wanted to give to the questions. Dr. Lee, I want to hand over to you. We interrupted your program a little bit, so over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Rose, for organizing the Q&A sessions instead of me. I think I'm very sorry for my lost the network during the video playing. I think there is some burden for my computer, so we can share the whole video in YouTube with the help of organizer for more details. And I think yeah, it's time to say concluding remark for wrapping up these sessions. I would like to thank you all of you, the panelists, for your time and effort. With your supporting opinions, I'm sure that the CTCN will take another big leap to the next level of innovation. And thank you everyone who joined as attendees these discussions. So thank you. Bye now.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.